Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedalshift Project. The Pedalshift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments around the bike touring lifestyle. From tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Show notes and more are available at pedalshift.net/211, and you can email the show, pedalshift@pedalshift.net, or call a voicemail hotline at 202-930-1109, and check Pedalshift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 211th edition of the Pedalshift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition of the show, we're doing yet another tour journal, this time a Brompton overnight on the C&O. This was a bit of a surprise, and I'm really excited to share what this turned out to be in this episode. But first, as always, a little bit of housekeeping, a little late housekeeping here at the top of the show. First thing is, today, literally, as I'm here recording this, I was able to pick up my touring bike. Finally. I mean, it was in dire straits, and I didn't even realize it. It's, the old adage of the boiling frog. I know it's gross, but the whole thing about if you're sitting in water that is slowly heating up to boiling, you won't realize it. Same idea here with the touring bike that's really jacked up. I was riding it, not realizing how jacked up it truly was. First of all, A, what a difference. B, I'm hoping to pull together another mini tour using the said bike to share with you all very soon. And no, it's not going to be on the C&O if these little details can all work themselves out. So logistics are the key. Speaking of such logistics, next week's show is going to revisit the whole COVID situation. I know that's not everybody's favorite subject, but I do think it's worth revisiting specifically in an entire podcast episode. Look, touring as we knew it just isn't possible anymore, and at least for the near future. And how we modify what we do is the difference between being responsible and, frankly, being irresponsible as a bike tourist. On next week's show, I'm going to share my thoughts on what I think is a responsible way to handle bike touring, both this year and maybe perhaps beyond as well. If you've got any thoughts, if you've been out there touring or you've been thinking about planning a tour and have thoughts on what you think is sort of the right kind of headspace for all this, I would love to hear what you have to say. Feel free to call the voicemail hotline. That's 202-930-1109, or better yet, perhaps, maybe, I don't know, shoot me an email at pedalshift@pedalshift.net. All right, on to a Brompton overnight on the C&O. So as I mentioned, with my proper trail bike in the shop, but a real need to get out on an overnight, I turned to a C&O newbie, my trusty 12-inch wheeled, very orange Brompton, as my chariot to an urban-ish stealth camping overnight. Would the trail chew up the Brompton? Would my orange gear prove too, orange for stealth camping? If you can't get your adventure by the leader these days, may as well go in sips. Mere steps from the C&O mile marker 0. This is a special edition of Pedalshift, and it's going to be a self-contained S240 stealth camping ride on the Brompton on the C&O. I have a kind of a favorite, relatively close by stealth camping spot that I like to go to from time to time. And my big bike is not ready. As there was an outside chance it could be ready by today, but more likely supposed to be ready by tomorrow. So I'm left with the Brompton. And the Brompton is not typically a great bike for the C&O. Well, I'm assuming, because I've never ridden it on there. I think that the tire size, I've often been asked, hey, how wide of a tire is too narrow? And I think that the width of these tires is actually going to be just fine for the C&O, especially for the distance that I'm going to be going. It's probably only going to be an hour or so biking, maybe a little bit more. It is, as one would expect on the 4th of July weekend when I'm doing this, sultry, hot, steamy, and so conditions are not great for a real long bike ride, but for a fun one. So I have a nice little cold bag with some cold beverages for after the ride. I got my hammock, and I'm hoping to be able to get there with several hours left of sunlight and set up my hammock kind of tucked away where no one will see me and get the solitude that I have frequently said I crave during all of this. So we're going to give this a shot. So come along, if you will, on the first time I am taking the Brompton out on the C&O for a stealth camp S240.
from mile marker 5.6 on the C&O trail. I will say one thing. The Brompton rides like a dream on the C&O, and I can't tell you how surprised I am at that. I didn't expect it to be bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I expected it to be stiff and a little jarring. Now, it's not. I will say my tires are pretty inflated, so it's not a supple zone. Hat tip to Russ and Laura over at Path Less Pedaled. But, I wonder if it's the Brooks saddle, something that I've said, Brooks saddles, who cares? Like it, it's fine. But I wonder if that's a real shock absorber. It's been a darn comfortable ride so far. And we're about halfway, a little more than halfway to where I like to pull off. So, and it's off of Park Service property, as far as I can tell. So, not trespassing on Park Service property or doing anything off of that. Probably trespassing on somebody else, but I don't see no trespass signs. So that is my stealth camp credo. If there's a sign, obey it. Looking forward to getting there. It's been fine. I'm very bundled up for how hot it is, but I've been finding that I like wearing quick drying materials, whether it's merino wool or synthetics. And I've gotten into wearing longer pants, but loose fitting clothing during the heat. And I'm finding it breathes real well. It's as good as being exposed to the sun, but with less sun exposure. As you can probably tell by my pauses here and there, the trail is not empty. I wouldn't expect it to be. This is the day before the long weekend, and it's after work hours. You might be able to hear the traffic from, I believe that's, I think that's Canal Road right up there. Still, and it's a relatively fast-moving road. That's a big commuter route out of DC going up towards the Beltway 495. So a lot of folks getting out of town, I think, for the 4th of July, which is pretty typical, even amongst these days. But I have to say, I'm looking forward to doing this as a stealth camp for one real big reason. Just again, I like stealth camping. I like to stay in practice, I guess, but also just to to ensure that I would have a campsite to myself. I was originally thinking about going out to Swains Lock, but because I didn't want to put the Brompton through that much mileage, not knowing how it would react, thought, okay, well, do my off, take the C&O out to where my stealth camp spot is and go from there. But now I know the Brompton can probably handle it. I don't know if I would do it for all 184 and a half miles, but it's good to know. It's good to know. Hello, Brompton, once again. Shock, surprise, you made a good bike. One other thing I thought I would mention here is the fact that I've got the setup here. I took a picture and put it on Instagram. Of course, you're seeing this probably several weeks later. But I've got the tent in the orange duffel, the waterproof duffel, and then I've got my kind of classic hacked Ortlieb on the front luggage block set up. So a little more than I certainly need to carry for an overnight. But inside the Ortlieb, I've got a cold bag, some cold beverages, and hammock, and a whole bunch of other things just to kind of take up a bunch of space. So it's all good. All right, off we go. From an undisclosed location, we'll call it stealth camping site. A beautiful spot, new to me actually. I was going to go to the one that I did last time, and I thought, you know what, the whole point of stealth camping is that you do a place and then you don't go back again. So I found a different one. Now, I will say, this one might be better. I'm not sure if it's flat where I am. Well, no, I see a few spots where I think pitching my tent will be a good idea. Interestingly, I'm seeing some scat right here that I'm going to hope is deer scat. but it looks more like bear, but I don't believe that there are bear in this area, so I think I'll be okay. I believe, again, judging from where I'm at relative to the trail in the map, I believe I am off of Park Service land. However, I can dimly see folks through the trees to a certain extent on the trail, but I think I'm so far away that I don't think that they could either hear nor see me unless they were really trying to look for me. I am not ensconced in orange. I'm ensconced in much more foresty colors. And of course, for the last couple of seasons, my tent has been de-oranged and is much better for stealth camping. My hammock is also good for stealth camping as well. So I think I should be okay. I think I feel good on all fronts. No trespassing signs off of Park Service property from what I can tell, and in a nice spot. Really covered. The sun is not getting in this area. Despite that, it's not very buggy right now, which I think seems good to me at the moment. And I think that this is going to be a really fun place to lay my head tonight. Ride was absolutely fantastic. I'm so impressed by the Brompton and what it can do. It's Big Sur was kind of its crowning achievement, and of course that was the first big tour I ever took it on. But it is pretty clear to me that this bike, really with very few modifications, can do trail riding as well. I'm not sure, as I mentioned before, that I would take this out with the intention of doing long-term trail riding. But, I think about this bike as a real possibility for the Erie Canal Trail, just because there's such a mix of road and trail riding. And the trail is in largely good shape for most of it. So, yeah, it performs really well, I think, on very hard, dry trails. I think it would do much less well on maybe the new surface right after a rain on the C&O. But I think that's a function mostly of tire width more than anything else. But very happy with it. Very surprised how easy the ride was out here. Well, I am going to kick back and relax for a little bit, kind of cool down. I've had a half a liter of water, so I took care of all of my very cold water. I've got a frozen iced coffee or cold brew coffee that is going to serve as chilling out all of my other things in my bag, including my dinner. And that should be nice and cold, hopefully in the morning as well. And I've got, another full liter of water. So I've got another half liter drink here in camp and another half liter to take me back tomorrow. That's more than I need for sure, but always like having extra. Yes, I will be taking my electrolyte pills after I'm done talking to you, because we all know what happens when I don't. And out here, when I'm trying to be stealthy, those screams of agony, not so much. All right. I'm liking this. Urban stealth camping, 4th of July. Getting to about an hour or so until the sun sets, I thought I would spend a little bit of time talking about what I'm looking for in a stealth camp and some strategies. And I think that the most important one that I've been working on lately is making sure that if I'm going to be within a sight line of activity, a trail, something like that, that I put distance and objects between me and the path. There is always a possibility that, someone with a dog could come running off and smell me and want to come investigate or whatever. But I think that the further away that you are, the less likely that that's going to happen. And also less likely that whomever is walking said dog would come out to investigate. Also, I think that by picking spots that are definitively not on private land, or at least obviously private land, that really makes a big difference. Or if it is that it's sort of unused. I pay attention to a lot of folks on YouTube who do stealth camping, and one of the interesting techniques that I've seen one guy do is that he tends to go on land that has for sale signs that look really old, which I think is kind of clever, so long as there's no trespassing sign. And I've never tried that, but I think that's a really interesting thing as a technique. One other thing that I do is, obviously I'm not talking super loud, I'm not making a lot of loud sounds, not moving around a lot. Not that I think that anybody would really care that I'm out here. I mean, in fact, if you probably polled most of the people that went by, they probably would think that it was perfectly acceptable for me to be out here, with a few exceptions. So, but the idea for me is that this is a in and out, be quiet, leave no trace kind of a scenario. So, I kind of live by those principles. The big thing that I've done lately is don't set up the tent too early. Now, it's funny, the last time I did this in a kind of
a bit of a pinch was when I was in Ohio last year, and I set up my tent relatively early. I think that I'm getting away from that. I think that what you want to do is do it as close to dusk as you can. Still have enough light to set your tent up, but do it where you're really at the end of the day, just in case for whatever reason you end up getting discovered or asked to leave or whatever. You've got that. It's easier to make happen. So what I think I'm going to continue to do is to hang my hammock, which is a low profile. It is brown and green. So especially here in the teeth of summer, and indeed probably into the fall, it blends in really well. And what I also have discovered through, more along the lines of like hanging my hammock in a proper way rather than making it super taut, is to try to make it so that the hammock is only hanging a foot or maybe 18 inches off of the ground when I'm sitting in it. And so what's happening right now is that I am at the level of a lot of the ground scrub that is here on the forest floor. So it's not just the trees that are sort of blocking me and the foliage of the trees, but all of the ground foliage as well, which is substantial. So it does an even better job of covering up where I'm at. One other thing that I am going to be in the habit of doing, especially when I'm going to be doing stealth camping, as in this instance where it's all I'm doing, is to bring a tarp to cover up my stuff for this phase. And I've got two sides to it. One is green and one is brown. The green side is more of a Kelly green, which I'm not sure is a super helpful color for most instances. Maybe someday I'll find an instance where the green is more helpful, but the brown I find to be really, really good. And what I do is I just cover everything up. As you all know, I travel with a lot of orange, and that'll stick out like a frickin' flare. And so when I cover up both, the Brompton is of course orange too, plus the panniers, plus all the bags, cover that up with a brown tarp, and I don't have to think about it while I sit here and enjoy a little bit of bite to eat, a cold beverage, and just kind of cool down and wait things out. So as a result, I am in a very stealthy space right now. As we get closer to dusk, the trail traffic is really going to come down. In fact, it already has. I mean, we're an hour away, and the only folks who are going to be out this direction are folks who live really, really close by, and that is a precious few number of people. You may or may not be able to hear, but I am within earshot of the Beltway as it crosses the Potomac River. So relatively close by to all of those areas. And there's just not a lot of, there's a ton of access points here, but I think that more and more people are going to be off the trail before dusk. So as a result, I end up getting to a point where when I'm setting up the tent, the odds of anybody coming by is much, much lower. I'm far enough away from being spotted that it's unlikely I'd be spotted anyways. And it decreases any anxiety that you would have in a scenario like this. And I think that's one thing that is the biggest impediment for folks who are looking to include stealth camping as part of what they're doing. I am generally a bit of a rule follower, but also I have the flip part of my personality where you don't tell me what to do. So I have kind of contrary points of view when it comes to all of that. But when it comes to camping and whatnot, I'm generally speaking a big-time rule follower. And, of course, leave no trace is an absolute must. So when I do something like this, I'm feeling like, okay, my footprint will be light to non-existent, and I will leave the place at least as good, if not better, as when I found it, and then I will be moving on. So I feel like if I'm a good citizen, then I can feel good about things. And also, as I've mentioned on other shows, that I prefer to, and not everybody follows this, but, you do you, ride your ride, etc. If there is a posted no trespassing sign, I'm going to honor that. If I'm going to be in a space that I know that the camping is technically prohibited, I'm going to factor that all in. As I mentioned before, I believe I am off of Park Service land. Technically speaking, camping here on the C&O or on Park Service property that is part of the C&O and not in a designated campground is prohibited. So As a result, I will attempt to honor that as best as I can in most circumstances. That said, this space and how I do it, I feel pretty good. If I am on Park Service land, I feel like I'm following dispersed camping rules that even though I'm technically not, I would not be following the letter of the rules, that I'm at least honoring all of the principles behind it. So watch me dance through the ethics of the whole thing. But I do think that this is a good opportunity for me to do something where I don't have a ton of time. I want to be able to spend the weekend back in DC. I didn't want to do another big tour. I really didn't want to end up at another campground where there were going to be a lot of other people because, quite frankly, I just don't want to be around people with what's going on lately. The numbers are all spiking, and I'd kind of like to keep by myself. So this is a good opportunity, and I think it kind of straddles all of the proper ways of looking at things throughout all of this COVID situation. So if you are unable to get out on a bike tour, consider doing something like what I'm doing right now. I am quite literally within the Beltway. So this is about as urban as you get. I was able to find a good spot. You can probably find a spot like this on Google Maps or something along those lines. You may know your neighborhoods in a way where you know there's a patch of woods where it wouldn't be, what's my phrase I've used, not illegal to camp in. So consider that as a possibility. If you're craving adventure and you really need to get out, an S240 is a real battery charge. For those of us who need this kind of a thing. And even though I was on a tour not so long ago, in fact, I still, as I'm sitting here right now, I still haven't finished iterating the last day of the tour journals for you. That'll be coming. In fact, you've already heard it if you're hearing this. Doing a trip like this is something that is accessible adventure, even during these days. So consider that. All right. Next step will be setting up my tent in a little bit, but first I have to finish is this a pint? No, this can't be a pint. This is it's 6 ounces of only the finest berries, blackberries. Very excited. Just about at sunset right now. It certainly is dusk one way or the other, and I've got the tent up. And I was curious what the temperature was because I was feeling fairly satisfied. I've cooled down. I've had some cold drinks, got my internal temperature down, and I thought, I wonder if it's getting into the 70s yet. Temperature right now is 87 degrees with it feels like 89, which is fascinating to me because normally I would be losing my mind at this point with that kind of temperature. So I don't quite understand why I'm comfortable right now. I've been very used to having, air-conditioned nights and all that, and haven't been out in the real teeth of summer riding much, but this has been fine. I do wonder if typically I would be riding 4 to 6 times what I rode, and I wonder if it just takes that long for my internal body temperature to come down after a longer ride. But this has been fantastic. I'm very, very comfortable right now, all things considered, and have one more cold beverage to drink for tonight, and then my cold brew will hopefully slowly melt through the evening. I have half a mind to actually take it out of the cold bag. I'm using basically all it is it's bubble wrap essentially. That it came from one of the deliveries that we got from one of the grocery deliveries, I think Whole Foods or something like that. Because I thought, okay, it doesn't need to, be a Yeti cooler or something like that to be able to pull this off for this ride. I mean, it was only an hour's worth of riding, but it is holding that coldness pretty well. So we'll see. I think I will leave it in there overnight. Because if it's in the 80s right now, I mean, that thing would melt pretty fast outside of it. So we'll leave it in there and we'll see what it ends up being like tomorrow morning. Be nice if it was nice and cool, because I think it'll still be in the 70s tomorrow morning, give or take. And I have to be honest, I probably will get up not long after the sun, although I will say that with the amount of coverage of foliage in here, I may not get the glow of the sun quite as early as I might be expecting, but we'll see. I will certainly not set any alarms. Tomorrow is the 4th of July, or I should say Independence Day observed tomorrow, the 3rd of July. So many folks will have the day off. Those that are still working in offices and are commuting, which is still an incredibly limited number of folks here in the DC area, and probably where you are too. But the interesting aspect of that is I probably won't get the traffic noise off the Beltway that I'm hearing right now. Although I will say in the last maybe 10 to 15 minutes, the real constant hum of the Beltway, which is, my best estimate is probably maybe a half mile from where I'm at, and perhaps less, has really died down quite a bit. So I think the 4th of July holiday traffic was probably giving the tip of the hat for all of that noise. So tomorrow morning may be very, very quiet. I would expect tomorrow morning to be more busy on the trail, as so many people are going to have that day off. I mean, probably almost everybody in the area, with the exception of folks who are working in the service industry, restaurants and whatnot. But I expect the trail to be probably pretty busy. So my intention is to get back on it and return home and basically just enjoy this trip in its small, glory-filled succinctness. And I think that one other takeaway that I'm going to take from this is that this is an easy trip to pull off for me. It's not a lot of burden on my partner to be able to kind of handle the dogs for just an evening, especially since I fed them, 2 of them dinner. She takes one of them with her when she goes into her office. And so it ends up working out pretty well. So I may consider doing this again, maybe not on this trip to DC, but we'll be back in another couple of weeks, give or take. I think one of the nights I'll do this. And the interesting thing is that I could even do this on a work night. It doesn't have to be on a night where the next day is a day off. So again, more accessible adventure. I think in some ways I was inspired by something that I read. There's a business in Portland that is delivering basically the gear for you, and it's rented to be able to set up a tent in your backyard and have a camping trip in your backyard. And it's all in a cooler and packed really well, and then you use it, and then you pack it up back up in the cooler, and then they pick it up for you. I just think that's a really clever idea, and I'm seeing so many of those ideas for those of us who aren't able to get the type of adventure we're used to, and just trying to find those ways to get what we can. And really, that's all we ever do, right? We always are sort of just maximizing what our capabilities are. I've had the great fortune to be able to travel around the country, typically, to be able to do my bike tours. And I've gone on some really amazing trails, and I get to revisit places, for the most part, that I really, really like, especially the Oregon and California coasts. I've been to the Katy Trail, I've done the Gap and the C&O, and I've done the Erie Canal, and I've done Florida. So many different, really cool, different places. Well, this year, that's not going to happen. So what can I do to find that same adventure in my backyard? I'm lucky. I've got the C&O. But what I'm finding is that there are opportunities, especially with the stealth camping things that you can probably pull off yourself. Or maybe you can find that kind of quick overnight, or maybe a couple of nights, but someplace close, someplace where you're not going to be creating a burden. You're close to home. You're able to do it in a responsible way, and that's been kind of fun. Also, I do have to say, I love me some stealth camping. There's something I think that there's a part of my brain that really enjoys the concept of going someplace and hiding and being responsible, and then clearing camp and going. There's something very, very backcountry about it. There's something very, very fun about it. There's a bit of a game. There's a bit of a hide and seek element to it. So I don't know. Don't know if that appeals to everyone out there, but I thought I would share this adventure with you. So next stop, well, tomorrow morning.
Well, that escalated quickly, or de-escalated quickly. I am all packed up. Stealth camp is kind of nice. Normally I'm so spread out and have a lot of stuff out, and it takes a while to break camp, but this was a matter of minutes, especially since I wasn't super aggressive about making anything. My coffee was already made. My breakfast, quote unquote, was already made. So yeah, that was pretty great. Now, the interesting thing is that when I stealth camp, man, I move way back into a forest. So what I don't remember is the route that I took in, and there's a lot of downed logs and things that I had to go over last time. So we'll see if I can minimize that. Of course, what I also predicted is coming to pass. There are many more people on this trail, so I am going to be seen exiting, but what you gonna do? I will try to minimize that as best I can. Of course, doing one little quick survey before I leave, looking around. I mean, I can tell that I was here, but for the most part, it's a pretty minimal disturbance of the ground cover here, including the thorns that likely took out my sleeping pad. So we'll have to see if that is the only casualty of things here. But otherwise, things look good. Where the hammock was, no marks on the trees, of course, have good straps for that. So I feel good that I am in leave no trace, no garbage, all garbage. The minimal garbage that I have is coming out with me. And all bottles and all items are accounted for. So away we go.
So it turns out nobody saw me re-enter the trail, and the ride back was totally uneventful. Sitting here right now, several days later, I have to say I'm still really impressed with the Brompton, and I don't think I'll ever underestimate its ability to handle a trail like that anymore. I'm also liking these quick overnights, and, this whole concept of it being a mini sip of adventure, look, it's not a good substitute for what I really want, but it's good enough. And you know what? That's going to have to do.
And as always, we like to close out the show with a special shout out to the Pedalshift Society. Because of support from listeners like you, Pedalshift is a weekly bicycle touring podcast with a global community, expanding into live shows and covering new tours like the Kessel Run. If you like what you hear, you can support the show for $5, $2, or even $1 a month. And there's one shot and annual options. If you're not into the small monthly thing, check it all out at pedalshift.net/society. On to the society. Kimberly Wilson, Caleb Jenkinson, Cameron Lean, Andrew McGregor, Michael Hart, Keith Nagel, Brock Didis, Thomas Skadow, Marco Lowe, Terrence Manson, Harry Telgadis, Chris Barron, Mark Van Ram, Brad Hipwell, Stuart Buchan, Mr. T, Nathan Poulton, Stephen Dickerson, Vince LaGreco, Cody Florchinger, Tom Beninati, Greg Braithwaite, Sandy Pizzio, Jeff Muster, Seth Pollock, Joseph Quinn, Byron Patterson, Joachim Robber, Ray Jackson, Jeff Fry, Kenny Mikey, Lisa Hart, John Denkler, Steve Henkel, Miguel Quinones, Alejandro Aviles Reyes, Keith Spangler, Greg Towner, Dan Gebhardt, Jody Zeranin, Lucas Barwick, Michael Baker, Brian Bechtal, Reinhard Biggle, Greg Middlemas, Connie Moore, William Goffman, Brian Benton, Joan Churchill, Mike Bender, Rick Weinberg, Billy Crafton, Gary Matushak, Greg Latois Lopez, James Sloan, Jonathan Dillard, John Funk, Tom Bilch, Ronald Piroli, Dave Roll, Brian Hafner, Misha LeBlanc, Ari Messenger, David Grotke, Wally Estrella, Sue Reinert, John Letko, Stephen Granada, Philip Mueller, Robert Lackey, Dominic Carroll, Jackie McCulloch, John Hickman, Jack Smith, Carl Presso, David Neves, Patty Louise, Terry Fitzgerald, Peter Steinmetz, and Timothy Fitzpatrick. And thanks also to all past and anonymous members for helping make this show happen. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedalshift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedalshift project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.